Hello to all my viewers and subscribers, welcome to this new video. Today I'll be doing a little or a small scale simple tutorial on mixing. So mixing is basically where you set the volumes of everything within the mix, so like your bass, your guitar, keys, drums, whatever else you've got, and also you can clean up the mix as well, which does come under mixing. So before we begin with today's video, just want to let you all know that mixing is something that can be unique to the individual. So some people might find their own ways of doing it, others might follow other people's ways of doing it. It's kind of whatever's comfortable for you, that's how some people mix. So this mix here is just a small scale demo mix. It's not really anything serious I've done. So in it, it's just like, this is all the some sound effects from Half-Life 2 that I got from the SFM folder. Just use them for like examples of real recordings. So if people recording live, these are just all MIDI clips apart from these, which are kick samples, which are samples from Simon Savida pack. So this pack I'm hovering my mouse around. So let's begin with setting the volumes. So in this part of the video we'll look at how to set the volumes of whatever it is in your mix. So not everything's routed to the, that's from a meme I did for Reddit, but I won't be needing that because it'll be for another thing anyway. Just route everything to the mixer so we can control the volume of that as well. There we go. So in a lot of other videos I found they do use a lot of advanced terminology like faders and wide, stereo, mono, but I'll explain those in the very most basic form because they're all their own videos, and it might be a bit easier to make this video a lot shorter for people with short attention spans to pay attention to. So what do I mean by set the volumes? So for somebody who's never heard sound before or didn't do science class or physics or whatever you get taught how to control sound in, basically what volume is how loud or quiet something is. So say I had this sound effect on to this volume, as you can hear it's very quiet. That's what people mean by low volume or low gain if you're a guitar player who's using an amp. Now volume and gain, they're just the same thing, but they can mean different things depending on what your context you're using it in. So say if you're talking in the context of a guitar amp, which if you're wondering what that does on a guitar amp, that knob controls how loud or quiet your sound is. If you're using distortion, it's how much distortion you're putting on it and or how little distortion you want on it. So that's what we mean by gain and volume. So in the case of mixing, volume and gain mean the same thing. So if you hear someone, if you're watching another video, when they say like, oh, I'm going to turn the gain up or I'm going to turn it down again, that's what they're talking about. So how you can do that is you can either do it while playing the mix or you can guess. I don't recommend guessing, or if you don't want to use a fader, you can use a limiter or a compressor. They work in a similar way, but they are their own subject matter. I'll get into those when we get into adding like plugins. So with volumes, all you're doing is just turning it down or up. So do that later. So as you saw, I was altering these things. Now what are they? So For somebody who hasn't seen a live sound desk before, you probably won't be familiar with these things. So all these things are that I move up and down. We call these faders, and these faders control how loud or quiet or how much input you're putting into a sound desk or into a PA system. So for people doing this live or on a live sound desk, you probably be way familiar with these, but if you're not, that's fine. Doesn't really matter for this video. So for simplicity, I'll just show you a little bit about these and how you can use them. So when you're mixing something, if you're can't speak always do this when I'm making videos. So when you turn this up all the way, what that will do is it will do something called clipping. Now it can also happen on the master as well, but we'll get into the master in a second. So essentially what you're doing when you're clipping, if you want to know more about this, you can watch my first ever tutorial video, which is about clipping. What that does is you're pushing a speaker to its very limit, and what can happen sometimes is that it can distort, it can break, can buzz sometimes. So I remember at my college someone turned up the bass so high on an electronic drum set and they broke the PA system. There was all smoke coming out of it. It's crazy. So to prevent that, you can either turn this down or you can use a limiter and a compressor, but again, get into that later. So this is what clipping looks like. Obviously that's not it, but so when this comes in, you see what I mean. So as you can hear there, it was distorting, and it was on here, it was going red. Now that red, what that's telling you is you got it too loud. You're going beyond the limit of this. So how you can stop clipping, all you got to do is just either you can turn it down, you can compress it, limiter, even sometimes EQ it to take out the clipping frequency. So in this part of the video, we'll be looking at buses. So what a bus is where you're able to control all of this at the same time. For example, say I routed all this to one channel, so we'll call this bus. So you can see where I routed it all to. So in FL Studio, there are other ways you can do this on other doors, or it might be done for you. So let's show you how to do it. So how to make a bus is you go down here to this little arrow on the place you want to route it to. So you right click, then you go to route to this track only. So don't worry about not being able to hear this, because it's going to here, which is routed to the master. So now what will happen is you'll hear that playing on here. So as you can see here, this is still playing because this is the signal that's going into this, and this is the output of that signal. You said single. So I'll go over inputs and outputs in the next part of this video, just so you can understand a bit more and go into more detail. So let's just put this on it as well. Now to check if you've done it right, a lot of people normally do this. So if you can only hear what isn't routed to the bus on its own without all the stuff you have routed on, then that means you've done it right. If you can still hear it, that means you've routed it to the wrong place. So I'll show you the difference or how that's supposed to sound. So this is with the bus on or the bus unmuted. So this is that with the bus turned off. So this is us seeing if we've routed it properly and the bus is actually able to work. So as you can hear, these two are completely muted. That's because I routed them to this bus here. So the benefits to having a bus, or routing everything into a bus, is that you're able to control two things at the same time. So say if you're somebody who's done double track guitars, say you recorded on one, you have one hard right guitar and one hard left guitar, and you want to control them at once. So some people quadruple track them, and you want to control them all at once, or you want them to all have the same effects on them. You won't have to keep going through it, adding effects. You can just literally add one plugin and it'll work for both of them. So as you can see, I put this limiter on there, on the bus, and now what we're doing here is controlling the output that's coming out of these tracks. So now we'll move in to inputs and outputs. So in this part of the video we'll be looking at what an input and output is. So this might not be entirely relevant to mixing, but I do think it's something that a lot of engineers should know. So what is input? So as implied by the name, it is basically the signal that you are putting into something. So for example, in this case with this bus right here, which we went over, which I explained in the last video, this will be the input. So our sound effect would be the input. Now the output, as you might have guessed, as implied by the name, is what is coming out, or what is being played out loud. So for example, this bus would be the output, and it's what is projecting it out. So to help people remember it, so the input is the audio going into getting on the bus, and the output is what is coming off the bus. So what I mean by that is basically it's going in and what's coming out. So that's a way I've got of remembering it. I know it might be a bit confusing, but that's how I remembered it.